Hey everybody, and welcome to LightBox Expo 2022. Yeah! Raise your hand if you like animation. What? Everybody? How did I know that was going to happen? That's crazy. Oh yeah. Chris is like...
I do.
Chris has gotten into live action now, so he's like out of our league. It's like... He's like, oh, wait, I'm getting a text here from Steven Spielberg. I'm going to fiddle with this microphone all through this panel. This is horrible. Okay, I'm going to introduce these guys. I'm going to have these guys introduce themselves in a creative way, because I always love not only hearing, you guys know what they've done, actually, so it almost feels like a waste of time introducing this hugely legendary panel that we have here today. And I'm not saying that because I believe that, and I think you guys believe that, but I've worked with all these folks, except for Jill, I guess. Yeah. Oh, Jill, let's work together. But I know them, and I know the legends that they are. I know what they've created, and I'm super honored to be able to be the host of this panel today. So let's start with Chris Williams in the house. Now each panelist, each of these guys are going to tell us two things that they're known for and one thing that they probably are not known for that they have done in their career.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming. I suppose that I am known for, I just worked on a movie called The Sea Beast that came out this year.
On Netflix.
Thank you.
On Netflix, yep.
On Netflix, and I worked at Disney for 25 years, and I worked on, I suppose, Big Hero 6 would be one that
Big
people know.
Hero 6. As a director.
As a director, yes.
One thing nobody would know about you.
A lot of people don't know that I am the voice of Oaken in Frozen.
What? I didn't know that.
I'm the guy that says, big summer blowout.
Yeah. He'll be doing autographs later for Oaken. Yeah.
I'm just going to leave now.
Our next guest, Jill Culton.
I don't know. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming. Let's see. My last film, I wrote and directed Abominable.
Yeah.
Right before COVID. Yay. That was kind of great. I've also directed Open Season a million years ago when you guys were like 4.
We love Open Season.
And
what voice did you do?
And let's see, like the thing that no one knows probably is that I also designed Jessie the Cowgirl at Open Season 2.
And can you sing the song too?
No, I'm not going to sing the song.
Oh, you don't
right
sing
now,
the song?
No, I could, but
That's
everyone would
disappointing.
run screaming, so
Yeah.
I'll bow out from that one. Okay.
All right. I'll sing it later. It's okay. And one of my friends from way back when, I'm so proud that she's here today. Brenda Chapman's in the house. Brenda, what are you known for?
I was one of 3 directors on Prince of Egypt.
Yeah. Wow.
And I also wrote and directed Brave.
Yeah.
That's right, she did.
And the little known fact about me is that I was the singing voice for Miriam and Prince of Egypt in the little scene when Moses discovers who he is.
Yeah.
No way. Last but not least, we have with us, Chris Sanders. What are you known for, Chris?
I am known for co-writing and co-directing Lilo and Stitch.
There it is.
Also co-writing and co-directing How to Train Your Dragon. I am lesser known for, this is going to be a weird one. So it used to be if you went into a comic store, there would probably be a photograph of Stan Lee.
Yes.
And he's staring at Spider-Man. They're face to face, nose to nose. I'm the person wearing the Spider-Man suit.
Oh, nice.
That was a good. I knew that actually, and it is a great story. Actually, if you haven't heard this story, the longer version of that is on the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast. We did an interview with Chris, and he tells us the whole story, how he used to be, he was the only one that fit in the costume. He worked at Marvel Productions. They were doing a whole publicity thing. I'm not going to say the rest because you got to listen to the podcast. Okay. I'm nervous here to be here with you guys because like I said, I'm so affectionate towards all these folks, and I'm so excited to be here. And a lot of these guys have worked together. That's the great thing about the animation industry is that not only do we, we look up to each other, we geek out sometimes, but more than anything, we hang out together. We like each other. It's a small community of friendships and relationships and sometimes marriages too. You know what I'm saying? But in this panel, I know Brenda and Chris, you guys have known each other the longest. How do you guys know each other, and how far do you go back? You didn't expect that, did you?
I remember meeting you in the Mermaid trailer way back when we were doing.
What's a mermaid
Mickey.
trailer? Is that where the mermaids were kept, or?
Yeah.
It was after Disney got booted off the lot. They were redoing the Flower Street building at 1400 Flower Street.
Which was like a bunch of warehouses.
Yeah, and they were still remodeling part of it. So, and I know this because I just saw Ron Clements. So this is how it went down. I got kicked off the lot, sent to Glendale warehouse, and then they started doing development for Mermaid and some Mickey shorts and stuff. And they didn't have enough room because of all the renovation being done. So we met, it was a double wide trailer across the street at the back of a bowling alley.
Hey,
So
that's the best way to.
That's where Mermaid was.
That's where
kinda
friendships
born.
are born, right there.
Right.
And that's where I met Chris.
And was Chris was he barking or having sugar? Was he running around?
Yes.
Yeah. Chris, what about you? What was your first impression of Brenda Chapman?
I was very impressed because you were working on Mermaid, and I didn't work on Mermaid, but I got to see a bunch of it, and it may have been you that let me hear some of the recordings because you guys would get the recordings from Howard on cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And
Howard Ashman.
Howard Ashman, yeah. And so like certain things like the Sea Witch song, he would send them demos, and I got to hear it on cassette with like him playing the piano, just doing it solo, and. Although the one in the film is amazing, you haven't heard anything until you heard his version. It's incredible.
Is that on YouTube?
Yeah.
Can we get that on YouTube or something? No?
Do you have that?
Put that on YouTube.
I don't know.
I might. I might have
Kevin
it.
has it somewhere.
You should get it. That'd be great to put out there. Yeah.
Oh, you actually have it? Somebody in the... Oh, well, if it's been released, we don't care anymore. It's not special. All right. So let's get to directing, I guess. Or work our way into it anyway. Let's talk a little bit about schools. We have a lot of students in the house. How many students? Yeah. You want to get in the animation industry? These guys can all give you jobs. No, I don't want to do that to them. But let's talk about schools a little bit. CalArts has always been, particularly in our generations, Chris is the young one here, so I don't know if we can include him, but CalArts was the place to go. That was like, and for good reason, for a long time that was the only place to go for animation, really. But started by the Disney family. You guys have probably heard the stories. But it had a great brand for, getting people into Disney straight from school. I want to say you three went to CalArts, is that right? Yeah. Chris, Jill, Brenda, and who's some of the people that were in your class that were influential on you at CalArts?
I sat right next to Kelly Asbury.
Yeah.
Kelly.
Like that was such a shock because like your whole life as an animator or a cartoonist, you're probably like just it's a solitary thing when you're like in high school and stuff like that. So when I got to CalArts and I sat right next to Kelly, who drew so fast and so well, it was just the most defeating feeling because I'd be like struggling to draw something and I'd look over and he's like, amazing. So yeah.
That's cool. How about you?
One of my best friends at school who used to make his own clothes out of little kids' bed sheets.
Yeah.
You would think it was Jay Fui. It was actually Pete Docter who used to literally take dinosaur bed sheets. And
Oh, that's where the little dinosaur
his
came
own-
from.
Yeah,
Okay.
like his his own.
That explains a lot.
Bermuda shorts and stuff like that. But Pete was a really good friend. So many people, like when you go to these schools, you end up,
He was in my
working with them.
class. You were saying he's in your class?
Well, he was the class above.
Were we in the
so
same
We
class?
were probably in the same class.
We weren't in the same class,
No,
Jill.
no. Below. I was.
Oh,
like
you were the
2 years
class-
below. Yeah.
Oh, under.
But he was the first person who called me to come work up at Pixar. He said, "Hey, we're not just doing commercials anymore. We're doing
He called you before he
features
called
and-"
me. Interesting. My whole life would have been different. And
time.
Brenda, you have any recollections of your time at CalArts?
Yeah,
It's a good time for Sue Nichols is what I think of when I
Sue
think of
Nichols was a
CalArts.
class above me, actually.
Was she?
But
So
yeah,
you guys
she
met
was
there,
my
right?
best friend. We were roommates. She was one of the most talented people I've ever known, actually. So it's a big loss. But Joe Ramft, even though he was gone, by the time I got to CalArts, he was friends with a lot of people who were still there, so I got to know him. And I was just telling Chris, he was responsible for me getting into story because I was, like everybody there, was focused on animating. And then he came up and saw my boards for my final film at CalArts and said, "Hey, those are pretty good. You ever think about going into story?" And I was like, light bulb goes off, and it was
Joe got me into story too.
yeah. So
From
Really?
animation and
Yeah.
story, yeah.
Joe Ramps.
I know.
He
Late
was
greats.
everybody's.
We're talking a little bit about the late.
We're dropping a lot of
Kelly, Joe,
names
and
here,
Sue.
but
It's
I mean,
like they're all gone.
these are the, I always tell my students that we are honored to have been taught by and led by giants in the animation industry, and it's hard not to. You guys know this. You guys, if you're in school, the people around you that are sitting next to you are going to be one, your closest friends and allies in this animation industry. And two, you're going to learn these names of people that went before us because it's important. It's important to know those people. They were influences on us in a big way, but they were also, as you can hear, very close friends too. And that's really cool when you can have both. Where'd you go to college or school, Chris?
I grew up in Canada, so I went to Sheridan
Cool.
College.
Sheridan in the house. There's some Canadians here.
And it was an international program they did in the summer. And it was a great experience. I mean, the industry was a lot smaller back then.
Yeah.
And at that time, people were mostly just hoping to get a job in Saturday morning cartoons, right? It was a very different era. But that's where I got my first sort of experience with animation. And I did have one incredible teacher, Charlie Bonifaci, who was an amazing animator, and his talent and his patience and generosity really affected me really deeply. And then I have to say, I then got an opportunity to work at Disney, and that's where I met these guys and was so inspired. I was very inexperienced.
He was one of our young, story recruits on Mulan. Mulan had, first of all, I'll just say, sorry, side note, Mulan had one of the best story crews ever, for sure. And most all of them became directors in the animation industry, most of them at Disney. And Chris was our head of story and really shepherded this younger generation. I know, I'm glad you mentioned that because I know Chris was a big influence on you.
Absolutely. I mean, I was very green. I hadn't had a lot of experience, and I showed up, and at that time, of course, everyone drew on paper, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing these incredible boards up on the walls when you walk in, and it's a little intimidating, but mostly really motivating and really exciting. And of course, I saw Chris Sanders' boards, and I was like, I got to meet this guy. And then he turned out to be the head of story on the movie I had been assigned to, so I had Chris Sanders on one side of me and Dean DeBlois on the other side, and both incredible artists, both very mature artists and storytellers, and I knew I had so much to learn from these guys, and that was almost 30 years ago now, Chris.
I know.
But Chris was another incredible mentor to me, one of those people that has a big impact on your life at that critical stage,
Yeah.
Because again, I was really inexperienced. My drawings were crude, but Chris demonstrated the importance of really listening to people and challenging your assumptions and allowing other people to challenge your assumptions. And he really sort of helped, along with our incredible directors, creating an environment where people felt comfortable disagreeing and bringing all their thoughts to the table. And it was a really sort of a healthy, I think, exciting story environment.
And I think it's important that people know it's disagreement can be part of a relationship, a healthy relationship, right? It is part of every healthy relationship, and it is an animation. We did have disagreements sometimes, but I'll tell you, great things came from it. And you know what? You try not to take that stuff home, right? You never kicked your dog or anything, did you?
I don't have a dog.
Oh, good. Well, let's see, that spared your dog. One thing I'm interested in, too, is how, when you were, all of you, this is for the panel, when you guys were younger and starting out, you know, being influenced, but you know, starting as storyboard artists or starting at, you know, animators or in-betweeners or whatever you started as, what was your impression of directing, and did you have the ambition to direct pretty early on in your animation career? Was it an aspiration, or is it something you fell into? Who wants to start?
You know what? I can start only because I also have a good Chris Sanders story.
Oh.
I think this is going to be.
Oh, let's all do Chris Sanders
Let's all do
stories.
Chris Sanders story.
He's
it
like, why
kinda
did I
ties
come?
into the Chris Sanders story. But when I first started out, one of my first gigs was, again, because of Pete Docter, a good friend of mine. He called up and he said, "Hey, Jill, I've started this commercial company called Pixar, and we are going to do a feature film, and we are looking for 12 animators. Would you be interested in coming up here?" And I was like, I don't know anything about the computer. And he said, "We don't want you to know anything about the computer.
We don't know anything about the
Just
computer
come move
either."
up here."
Yeah.
And he said, "We'll fly you up in a plane and we'll take you on a fancy tour." And I said, "And you're getting me out of LA? Okay, great. No, I don't even need the tour. I'll do it." I signed up right there. And 12 of us went up there and started on Toy Story, right, as animators. And it was like
You were like
all
hire number
started-
12?
Well, it was crazy. There was 12 of us animating, and we started on the same day. That never happens. And it was like the whiteboard got wheeled out, and
This is a computer.
it was like today we're going to learn Unix, you know. And we were like, okay, you know.
And you're like, what did I
And,
sign up for?
Yeah, I wanted to wear the shirt that said I thought there would be no math, you know, that whole thing. So, and I think I felt like that, like for the first year there. But
So cool.
the fun thing is like, you know, we were on the verge of something we didn't know would become something great. And I think there was just a bunch of us who had all gone to CalArts together. You know, I was living in a hippie shack in Mill Valley in the middle of the woods and loving it. And one of the on Toy Story, the one great thing was I got to animate for about 9 months, and then I went into John Lasseter's office and I flopped on his couch like I did regularly, and I just said, "I hate animation. I hate this. It's so hard." And it was just because back then there was no Menvy. There was Menvy. There was no Maya. So it wasn't like there was puppets that you had, you know, rings that you could turn and manipulate the characters.
Yeah.
It was all math. It was literally math. And you had to type in XYZ axes and then walk away from your desk for 20 minutes and wait until your character was rendered like this, you know, like terrible. And then, so everything was always broken. It was very hard back then. So he said, "They really want you in story. Will you become a storyboard artist?" And so I went down that road with Joe Ramp and everything, and it was wonderful. But one of my favorite moments, I have to say, on Toy Story was, for the first time, I didn't really understand the power of brainstorming and how, you know, just when you think your story's great, everybody says, like, pencils down, this sequence could be better, you know, let's get a group of people together and let's just brainstorm on how funny this could be, how great it could be, how much better it could be. And sometimes you just show one sequence, sometimes you show 3 or 4 sequences, and you have a group of people just blue sky, like, out, you know, and that's the power of fun storytelling. And one of those times we went down to Disney, we got a big group of people together, and Chris was part of that. And it was this Pizza Planet. I don't know how many of you guys remember that sequence.
Of course.
The Pizza Planet sequence where they're at, you know, the pizza place with the video games and all this stuff. And it was funny, but it needed to be funnier. And we had this signature sequence that was this rocket that had a claw that would reach down and get squeaky pizza toys. And the squeaky pizza toys would, if you got them, they would squeak, and they had little sunglasses on, and they were like pizza dudes, and they'd be like, "Hey, dude." And it wasn't very funny at all. And we played this sequence, and I just remember, like, the power of brainstorming again, having all these people in the room that can draw. That's that is another superpower of people in the industry. So not only do people like throw out, suggestions, but they're drawing suggestions.
Yeah.
And so I just remember Chris sketching quickly and holding up this image of an alien with 3 eyes pointing up to the claw, and he just wrote on the bottom, "The claw is my master." And we all like died laughing, and that has become like a signature thing that happened in one moment in one brainstorming session at Disney, during these early times on Toy Story. And that's like the power of like the group, the power of drawing, the power of creativity, and the power of being able to put it to pen and pencil on paper and hold it up and, influence sequels to come and toys and all that kind of stuff. So thank you, Chris, for that.
Nice. We would not have those guys if it wasn't for that meeting. Brenda, you have a story about when you were looking up scene directors, were you like, I would never want to do that? Or was it something that appealed to you?
No, it never really appealed to me, actually.
Was there a director that was like influential on you?
I loved, Ron and John were really inspiring working with them. And
Ron Clements and John Musker?
Ron Clements and John Musker, they did Little Mermaid and Aladdin, those
Everything,
guys.
yeah.
They kind of saved the industry. But I had tremendous respect for them, but I also saw just how incredibly hard it was, and I loved being in story. I loved working with story artists. I loved coming up with the story, and I loved handing off everything so the animators could do the tedious part to me. But when I left Disney to go to DreamWorks, I went to build the story department there. It was like, okay, this is going to be exciting. I'll be kind of the story guru, hopefully, like Joe is at Pixar, maybe, that kind of, well, he wasn't, no, that wasn't it. I just wanted to build the story department because the reality was that Joe Ranft was in Jeffrey's mind, and he told me, and Joe even at that time told me, he was going to DreamWorks.
Oh, really?
And that's kind of why I went.
Wow. I didn't know that. Scandal.
So
there wasn't anything going on. I mean, you guys are friends. You're just,
No. I went because he's a great story guy, and so none of that.
I know, right?
There was
who
none
thought
of
that?
that.
It's this audience. I don't know.
So, so I'd said no to Jeffrey because he wouldn't tell me what the project was, and then he finally told me, and I finally said yes because I thought Joe was going to be directing, and that I would be his head of story.
Yeah.
And then I get there, sign my contract, and then Joe does an about face and goes and signs at Pixar. I mean, he signs to stay. And it was like, ugh. And so...
Were you mad at Joe?
Yeah, I kind of was. But then I guess Jeffrey was asking all these people to direct, and everyone was saying no, because he either wouldn't tell them what it was, or they would say no because it was a Bible movie, and everyone was afraid of that. And so, and I was too, and that's why I wasn't going. But then, finally I was head of story, so I was doing that bit of it, working with the script and everything, and I was in a meeting with the two producers, Sandy and Penny, and Jeffrey asked Sandy and Penny, have you found a director yet? And they said no, and then he just didn't skip a beat. He looked at me and said, Brenda, you're directing until we find somebody else.
Boom.
I was like, so there was no asking, there was no question, because I said no. He'd asked me after asking my husband and everybody else under the sun. It was like...
Her husband is Kevin Lima.
Kevin Lima, directed Tarzan and Enchanted. Thank you.
Kevin thanks you.
So as I was sort of forced into that position, because I'd really never had that aspiration. I was very happy.
I've never heard somebody
in
say
story.
that they've been forced into directing a major Hollywood movies before.
Yeah, it was just like, there you go. And it's like the...
Suffer,
anyway.
enjoy the success too.
So I, after about 3 months, I was on my own for a while, and I realized, okay, everything that we're doing in development is supporting the story. So it became less scary.
Yeah.
And because I thought, I don't know effects, I don't know backgrounds, I don't know any of these other things, But I realized, I don't have to know it. The people that do it needs to know it. I just need to know that it supports the story, and I need to be able to guide them to keep helping the story. So I figured that out, and I enjoyed it. And then they brought in Simon and Steve from Amblimation, and so I had some comrades in arms they were great. I was very fortunate that we got along so well, because oftentimes you throw directors together, the studios decide who is going to be there, and you don't have a choice, and you don't always get along. I've seen films, and I'm not going to name them.
Oh, you can name them here. We're just
good.
family.
No. That it was ugly, and the film suffered because of it. But Simon and Steve and I really got along really well, and I felt that was a good introduction into being a director. And then after that, the bug bit me, and I was happy to try again with Brave. We know how that turned out. So, anyway.
Do we all know how Brave turned out? Do you remember Brenda and her influence on it early on? There was a lot of stuff that came out in not the marketing, around that time though in the press about, Pixar had hired one of their made a big deal about it, first female directors. And then?
A year and a half before it came out.
A year and a half before?
I worked on it for 6 years.
You were fired from the film?
I was taken off the film, yes.
Taken off the film.
And,
one of the biggest tragedies of animation, I would say. But the industry wept with you, and I don't know if you felt that way. I've always wanted to talk to you about this.
I did. I felt very supported by my colleagues. Yeah, and
Good.
that saved me on that one, because that was devastating. But at the same time, I got calls that same day that I was taken off. It spread so fast.
Yeah.
I got calls for jobs. So that was sort of validating.
All right, Chris Sanders, you want to tell us, how did you discover directing, and what was your first impression of it? Were you scared of it? Did you want to do it?
It kind of happened after Mulan, actually. I was just so involved in the day-to-day on the story of Mulan. I never really thought of anything beyond that. And after Mulan wrapped, Tom Schumacher, who was the head of animation at Disney, president of feature animation, he just sat down and said, "Is there anything that you would like to direct?" And I thought, at first I thought no, and then I remembered this little story I'd worked on, 17 years prior, this little children's book I'd tried to make, and that turned into Lilo and Stitch. I pitched that after I adjusted it and stuff like that. But the interesting thing was, and the thing I always talk to people about, what I didn't realize was that all the time I spent in story with Chris and with all of you, I was prepping for directing, because as a director, you don't get to do whatever you want. You are in service to the story of whatever film it is you're working on. So, and as a story artist, that's what you're doing. So every time I got a sequence from a film, for a little while, I was the director on that sequence. Like, I would take it away and work on it. And that's one of the really cool things about, I think, story, is that you are cooperating with the larger story crew and the directors and the producers, etc. But for a little while, you probably are going to sit around with whatever sequence you get, and you're going to get to do whatever you want, make it work. And that's really cool. I mean, and you get to write a little bit. You can change dialogue and stuff like that. So, I think that's the neatest thing about it. So, that's how I rolled into it, was just after Mulan.
Yeah, and I've said it before, and I like saying it to embarrass Chris and stuff and whatever, but Chris is the single force behind the story of Mulan. If it has success in any way with you guys in your childhood, I was a co-director on it, and I could say this officially in my own regard, or at least my own opinion, that more so than any scriptwriter, Chris Sanders had an effect on Mulan, and it would not be the character or the film that it is today without him. Yeah. Okay, Chris Williams, I had a question for you, and where did it go? It just went. I almost got emotional there about the Chris Sanders thing, so it really pulled me out of the moment. But most of the time, directors in animation are given a project. It's something that's already been developed. Obviously, Brenda was like practically at gunpoint, given Prince of Egypt. Jill, I think you were probably given Abominable. Was that your own idea? Oh, it was your own idea. Okay.
They wanted a story about a Yeti. They had about 7 projects in development and went through, and all of them had scripts and producers attached and lots of story stuff. And then they said, and then there's this one, and we just want a Yeti movie. And
You're like,
this
I'll
was
do
before
that.
all the other Yeti movies, by the way.
You were the first.
And well, it was early on, and I thought, well, there's a blank slate, so that's the one I took. So
Why wouldn't you? Yeah.
it was great.
And Chris, I think Sea Beast over at Netflix, that was your own pitch. Is that right? How did that
that's
go
right.
down?
Well, yeah, I worked at Disney for 25 years and had a great experience there, and worked with Chris on some movies, and proud of the movies that I worked on there. But one of the things that you become aware of is that there's almost like there's a tonal range that you're kind of corralled into a little bit. And what we've spent a lot of our time doing is trying to push against those boundaries and expand those boundaries. I think Lilo and Stitch is a great example of a movie that expanded what a feature animation can feel like, you know. But I really wanted to do a genre film, an action adventure film, like a proper action adventure film, like the ones that I loved as a kid. You know, I loved King Kong. I loved that movie even more than Star Wars. I love King Kong, and I love the Harryhausen films, the Sinbad movies, and all that. And I wanted to make a movie that felt like that, but tonally, that really is a little, or maybe quite a bit outside of what we were able to do at Disney, I would say. And so that kind of was part of my decision to leave, and I left on good terms, but I was just in pursuit of a different experience to make a different kind of film tonally. And so that led to the Sea Beast, and I do remember, I mean, it was hard because I worked with people literally for decades at Disney, and we all knew each other really well, knew each other's strengths and weaknesses and all that stuff. And I really, as you were saying, I really value collaboration. It's not a one-man show by any means, or one-woman show, or one-person show, I should say. It's really the power of the group, right? And I realized that first, I really felt something that first day that I didn't drive to Disney. I drove to Netflix, and I parked outside, and I realized I was alone. Like, I am a crew of one.
Yeah, that's scary.
And a big part of the job is going to be trying to get a bunch of hundreds of people excited enough to commit, months and years of their life to this.
You should have come to Lightbox. You got them all right here. They're ready to go.
And it's a big, I mean, Chris, you touched on it. You are so responsible to them, because it's not just you committing years of your life. They're committing years of their life too. And so you have to do everything you can to make the movie great, right? And so a big part of the job was to try to convince people, hey, come join me and work on this thing that isn't even a thing yet. It's just sort of, it's an idea, it's something I can talk about, but doesn't exist, Are you willing to commit years of your life to this thing? That's a big decision for anyone to make, But it's so important because I really feel that a director oftentimes, maybe when things are really working well, you are a conduit for other people's good ideas, right? And so it's so important to get a great team assembled so that you can be that conduit and get those great ideas up there.
That's cool. That's cool. And a good director also takes credit for a lot of good ideas done by other people. I still do that, with both Chris's here. Just love. I do the dog in Mulan. Ruff, ruff. No, just kidding. Anyway, I think that's awesome, and it really points to the responsibility of being a director is something kind of unique unto itself. And if you haven't been through it, particularly, I guess we can easily talk about the big studio kind of pipeline. That's what we're mostly, the experience that we have here on this panel is big budget, big pipeline kind of style animation. 2D or CG doesn't matter, but they're always like high stakes theatrical release features that you guys have done. So under that knowledge, what was tell me one thing that you love about directing and one thing that you dislike about directing. And this is for the panel, yeah.
You know what? I would say like my favorite part about directing is something Chris just touched on, which is just it's when you're a first-time director. I think the implication is that it's your movie, and you're in charge, and you get to direct because you're a director, so it's your movie.
You got the title,
but it's not that, and you have to start to realize that the studio that's putting up, between $30 and $150 million, has a say in this, and that it's a collaboration. I think that's something that every director is not prepped for when they go into directing. It's a little bit of politics. You're playing with the bigger studio. That's a lesson to learn. But I also think that what he was just saying is that you're a conduit, and first-time directors always feel like they need to control every piece of it. And the longer you're in this industry, the more you direct, the more you realize you're a funnel for great ideas. You can listen to any idea, and you're just the funnel for which the right ideas go through and enhance the story. So you can listen to anyone in that place. You don't have to be defensive. You don't have to feel angst every day. You can listen to anyone, and you're the person who lets those great ideas go through the filter. Sometimes you add to them, sometimes you change them, but you don't have to be angst all the time about it. And I say that because when you become a director, you're under instant pressure and stress. But the way to relieve that is to realize that you're there for a reason, and you're the shepherd of this great idea. And you need to figure out what you have to say in that, what purpose the world needs. Why does the world need to hear this story at this moment in history? You have to think beyond yourself and the fact you're getting a chance to direct. You've been given the right to shepherd a movie that is going to change the world in ways you don't know. So you have to look beyond yourself. You have to listen to other people. You have to listen to where the world is at and what message it needs to have, and you need to do your best to funnel that message.
Cool.
And that's hard when you're just trying to survive on a regular, everyday basis, right?
Is that one thing you like about directing, or?
You know what? It is the lesson I think I've had to learn, and it's a big lesson.
It's a
every
big
day I think
lesson.
you have to look outside yourself. I think the hardest thing, like I said, has
Well, I'm going to
been-
change my question. You know what? Let's just go. What's the best lesson that you've learned in directing,
Yeah.
Brenda? What's a lesson?
I was ready with the other.
Oh, do you want to go back? Okay, you go back, Brenda. I don't want to scatter your brain or mess you up in any kind of way.
And now I'm lost. No, I think it's what I loved about story, and it's what I love about directing is the collaboration, and that idea of you're not the auteur, you're not the only vision of the film. That's what you think that a director is, but you're the conduit, you're the guide. You are responsible to make a cohesive, clear film, but you have an immense amount of talent around you that you are the guide. You are the person who has to know what they're bringing and how to talk to them to get it in the direction that's best for the film.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of your job, is to know, sort of stand back, see the bigger picture, and make sure that all of that incredible talent is focused on the same goal. And I love that, and I love the fact that I don't necessarily have all the answers, but there are going to be people around me who have ideas, and I can throw out a bad idea. It's like, it's got to be something like this, but this really sucks, so no, this isn't it, but anybody have any ideas? And other people will throw in sucky ideas, and then people will hear those sucky ideas and come up with a really great idea.
Yeah.
And so I love that back and forth, and that sense of camaraderie that you get on a film. If you treat your crew with respect and dignity, you can have the most amazing time making these films. And that, to me, that's that's what I love. It's what I miss. I haven't directed for a while, so
Yeah.
dang it.
You want to work for Brenda now, don't you? I mean, respect and dignity. You work with me, I treat you like a servant. No, I'm kidding. Chris, you guys want to do a follow-up on either one of those questions, really?
You say.
Me say?
I want to know what
Me say, then you say?
Yeah, I like you say.
Well, I guess I'll just piggyback a little bit, and I think that related. I think one of the things I love is just the helping to foster an environment. The story room, especially, is really a sacred space to me, and the rules are different there, you know.
Yeah.
And you have to establish the ground rules and commit to those rules and reaffirm those rules, where it's okay to disagree, you know. And because in our daily lives we generally try to affirm each other, and maybe not on the internet, but in person, and
Never on the
and
internet.
be complimentary, and we say, oh, I really like your haircut. You don't very often have someone say, oh, I don't like your haircut. I can picture a different haircut you could have had. You know what I mean? That's not how we conduct ourselves, right?
That's true.
But
yeah.
in the story room, it's different. You have to be able to disagree respectfully, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you hear an idea that you don't think is right, you have to be able to just let it exist, just hear it and dissect it and try to figure out where it's coming from, and allow other people to play with it, and just feel that power that comes from the group when you just establish those ground rules.
That's kind of there's no bad idea.
No bad idea, and there's sort of a counterpoint to it, which is it doesn't mean ultimately it's story by committee or that you give in to someone else's will or something like that. It just means really like a healthy respect for other people's points of view is going to change the film for the better. But you can't do those things if you don't establish a respectful, to your point, a respectful environment.
That's good. Chris Sanders, you want to add?
Yeah, it's. I think that for me, a crystallizing moment was when I started to direct Lilo and Stitch, and there were certain aspects I was very comfortable with, and certainly many that I knew almost nothing about. One of those being animation. And I remember that Dean and I were talking to each other before we went into our first animation review. And I thought, I don't know how to tell people to move things around. And then it occurred to us that we didn't need to. What we would do is treat everybody as though they were an actor, in a sense. And so when, in animation, when somebody came in and we talked to them about their scene, we would speak to them as though they were an actor. And we said, this is what we want. Mm-hmm. Do that. And we would talk about the emotional wavelengths and the story needs of that moment. And we both made a decision that if somebody animated something or drew anything, painted something, whatever, and it was different than what we had imagined, but it did the job, then we would say yes, and it was done. We would not go back and go, yeah, it works, but I wanted it more like this. That would be a waste of time. So to allow people creativity and to allow them to do their art to their maximum capacity is the joy, I think, of working in animation. And one of the things I have learned is that during the process and after the process, certainly you're asked many, many questions. You get to do a lot of interviews, which is a lot of fun. It really is. You cannot credit people enough. They will tend to go, oh, you did this. Like, no, that was, and you can talk about every single person, and like Rick Sluter, who was our art director on Lilo and Stitch, who did an immense job and changed the whole film. You can't credit people too much, but you should always do that.
That's a really good point, too. Yeah, I used to tell my students, too, that one of the biggest things that I learned about directing was to become a servant, not only a servant to the film, but also a servant to the crew, that if I put myself kind of under them to say, I want you to shine, I want to see about your ideas, let me hear what you have, I want to see what you can contribute. I mean, to your point, really, to all your points, it really helps to ignite the crew to feel like they're vested now. It's their film, too. And I think when you can get to that point as a director and pull self away as much as possible, ego, all those things away as much as possible, and then go home and spend your big paycheck. I mean, I think that's really what it's about. It's really what it's about at the end of the day.
You know, Tony, like the other thing is these, as you guys know, and films have gotten shorter as far as their production timeline.
Oh, yeah.
Like way back when, you know, our Monsters, Inc. took us 5 years, Toy Story took us 5 years. Like now they're giving the average 2.5 years to make a film. How long did CVs take, Chris?
Production was about 2.5, yeah.
2.5. That is like running a marathon at full speed for 2.5 years. And we all know that. So in order to keep the morality of your crew alive for that long, you number one, can't do it all on your own. And number two, have to keep the morale up for that long. And I think the way to do that is to empower your crew. So we can't say that enough. Like, I think everyone here has said that, like, directors have to be humble and listen to their crew and empower their crew and rely on their crew. And that is a very hard thing as a director, because you feel like you're supposed to take control. And that's actually the thing that will kill you in the end.
Well, I'm proof positive of working with Brenda Chapman on Lion King. I remember we shared an office. I tell the story all the time. You're like, didn't we know each other for any other thing? That's all you ever talk about. Anyway, we shared an office for a very short time. It was her office. I came into it for like 3 months. I was an animator on Lion King. And Pumbaa, the warthog. I'm Pumbaa guy on Instagram, in case you didn't know. For a little time, they put me in a story, and I'm like sucky. I'm like one of those animators that just dives in a story. Oh, I know how to do this. You just do a bunch of drawing. Funny expression here, fart, you know. That was the character, not me. And then, so Brenda sharing a room with me. It's true. Brenda sharing a room with me, she was always so gracious. She was the head of story on Lion King, too. And so I'd show her my stuff. She'd say, oh, that's so great. That's so nice. Okay, what if we did a little bit of... And you know what she did, though? She ingratiated herself to me. She was so kind to me, so nurturing, that I always said I would work with Brenda again in a heartbeat, you know, and as long as I was her boss. Okay, so we are going to go into some Q&A now. Wow, I'm going to go start here, of course. Such exuberance. Tell us your name, and then what's your question?
Hi, I'm Caitlin Goldstein, and well, now I have a question about The Lion King as well, but I'm gonna go to the question that I actually had, which was, as directors in a medium that a lot of times is viewed primarily for a children's audience, you are working within the boundaries of and you even said that you try to push the boundaries of what more you can tell in the stories. What were times that you yourself were pushing boundaries, and times that potentially the studios were pushing hard against you to not have those boundaries be pushed back?
Okay. Oh, yeah. Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Anybody want to take that one? You should talk about 4-quadrant and what that means.
4-quadrant. Come on, break it down, Jill.
There is a term in the industry called 4-quadrant filmmaking, and that's basically, what does it mean? Young, old, adults and children, or so, it's everybody.
You're basically
right?
trying to hit every market
You're trying
possible.
to hit every single marker possible, and that is actually insanely hard for animation, because they all want to be 4-quadrant films, which means you can't just aim towards teenagers. You can't just aim towards the little kids. You have to make sure that your humor reaches the parents that are going to take the kids to the movies and all that. So in a weird way, it is an insanely hard medium to target, because you have to reach, you know, everyone on some level. I can think of a few places that I wanted to push the boundaries, but honestly, right towards the end, you usually have audience test screenings, and sometimes they pull you back even on the things you push, which is, that sounds bad, but it's like you take the general audience, and then you take about 40 people for Q&A. They watch your film when it's not completely done yet, and you go to places like Arizona or something, like to a strip mall, and there's like 400 people that watch it, and then 40 people in the focus group, and like on open season, there was a scene where we had a knife in the scene, and like that was gone this fast, you know. The moms, like, you know, raising their hands like, I do not want a knife in this movie, you know, and then little kids raising their hand and going, well, how can he be a hunter if he doesn't have any kind of weapon? And like, then the mom's like, shh, you know, and like, so those audience,
because they're not really
test
dying, right?
I know.
Yeah.
It's funny, because I think all of us are, the word audience test screening is like a word that brings chills to your bone,
heart,
because
yes.
you've worked so hard and you feel like you've just pushed the right things, and then sometimes they get pulled back down again. So
Yes, I've been to Arizona too.
tell us the story, Chris. Come on.
It's horrible. No, nothing against Arizona, but the test screenings are horrible.
They'll eat you alive in Arizona. Let's keep going. I want to try and hit as many people as possible, so you go ahead and pick somebody there. We'll try and keep our answers down to maybe one person if you guys don't mind.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to take this off. So I've been a storyboard artist for the last year, and I want to transition to direct. I'm from Arizona.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. You're right. That's what Arizona is.
They know everything in Arizona. We know that.
But I'm not exactly sure. I figure within the next couple of years I want to make that transition, but I don't know how to apply for directing jobs as a storyboard artist. Because, as I learned very quickly when I first got jobs as a storyboard artist, that they don't want to hire you for things that you have not done.
Right. You get pegged.
Right. So just advice on how you make that next step.
Anybody want to get that one?
Well, I think a lot of times I don't know if you're working at a studio, but it's usually, I think we all came up within, except for possibly Jill, who.
The golden one.
But we all worked our way up within a studio. And so they were aware of the work we did, our contribution on the stories that we worked on, so they could see, the potential. Yeah.
I did that too. I think it's like, you become a storyboard artist, and then a lot of times they see you excel at story and they make you a head of story. And then sometimes as a head of story, you start to give your opinion on bigger story arcs for the whole thing, and then they see you as a director. That's kind of the trajectory. I think that at least the three of us, I don't know about you, Chris, that might have been the same.
Yep, same.
But
I think we only have time for probably two more. I hate to say it. Two more. The mic's coming back there to the back. Right on.
Hi, I'm Danielle Silverstone. This question is about Prince of Egypt in particular. As a Jew, it is very important to be able to tell Jewish stories and to be able to see Jewish media represented so well. So how did you feel taking on such an important Jewish story and, of course, voicing such an important Jewish role? And, what did that mean to you?
Yeah. What?
It was incredibly intimidating. We wanted to respect it. We had so many religious leaders coming in. It touches not only the Jewish religion, but Christian and Muslim, that story. So we brought in those three faiths, getting lots and lots of feedback on what we were moving forward with and what we were trying to do. And, we realized very early on we weren't going to please everyone if we made this a religious allegory story. So we found the brothers' story and focused on the human side and just kept the tent poles of the story that was told within the Bible and just focused on the human story. And I think that's what made it more palatable and accessible for everyone was that there was a human story, the story of two brothers in the middle of it. So we did. Okay, thank you.
All right, we got the thumbs up. Good. All right, one last one. It's up to you. You pick it.
Hello, my name is Pietro. I'm a writer, and I see how collaborative is animation. I love animation, and yet there's only one writer per film. And I'm always interested in finding.
Not always.
Well, yeah, not always. You're right.
We've all worked with
But
many writers.
Yeah. What I'm on a quest to find all the other positions that are like entry level or to get experience in the studio as a writer but unfortunately I cannot draw, so it's not story artist, and I bet I'm not alone in this. And I wanted to listen to your advice to get inside one of these studios and get experience. I'm writing for indie studios, but I think there's something very attractive about this collaborative aspect of bigger studios.
Times have changed quite a bit. I'll just pick this up and then you guys can follow up with it. But writers are becoming more and more powerful in the animation industry. Jennifer Lee, I'm forgetting her last name, at Disney. She came up, she's now the CEO or chief creative officer, but she came up through writing and became a co-director very soon. And that's followed suit at Disney in a lot of ways. Writers are becoming co-directors as long as they're usually tabled with or partnered with another director that probably knows the animation process and is more on the artist side. They make a good balance actually, because they are superior with storytelling. So that's usually, they make a good director. You guys have any other thoughts on that?
You know,
What's the
I mean,
worst
well, this
writer
is-
you've ever worked with?
Well, no,
Okay,
I was going to say, I will never say that. But, you know, just so that you know, like Toy Story, we had 9 writers on that movie. And a lot of them came from TV, like Seinfeld and comedy writers and all sorts of different places. So a lot of times, like right now, I'm working on a film with Netflix that has a TV writer as well for comedy. And he's so great in the room. And that's another thing too, is I've worked with writers who shall not be named that would not work in a room with the story crew or the directors. They were like, I'm going to go away and do my own thing and come back. That doesn't work well in animation. Animation needs collaborated, you know, as we've talked about, everybody collaborates. And so if you can be the kind of writer that is willing to be in a room and get different ideas from people and go away and write, I think that is going to be your winning ticket. How to get in is tough, but I would just say don't write for animation. That sounds dumb, but people who tend to say like, oh, I have this animated film I've written, we all read them and it's like, wow. Like we picked, like for example, I was at Sundance Film Festival and saw Little Miss Sunshine the day it sold.
Oh.
And I ran up to the directors and I said, is your writer here? And they said, yeah, he's this kid out in the lobby. And I ran out there and I talked to Michael Arndt and said, you need to write for animation. I'm working at Sony. Here's my card. And I said, because you do such great characters. It doesn't matter that it's, you know, kind of R-rated subject matter. Like, he writes great characters. That's what we do in animation. We want to find those people. And so, you know, I gave him my card and he ended up going to Pixar and writing for Toy Story 3. And now he's, you know, Michael Arndt. Michael.
He is Michael Arndt.
But,
And he writes for a lot of animation.
You know, he has an amazing career and he started in live action. So just keep your mind on great characters, great character stories. Don't try to write for animation. That's like the worst thing you can do, honestly.
Guys, we could be here all day. I know it, hearing from these guys. Let's hear it for this great panel of talent. Thank you all for coming and have a great time at LightBox.